Hi, everybody. It's Susie Singer-Carter, and I just wanted to take a minute to tell you about a wonderful product I just discovered. It's called Sociavi, and Sociavi in Latin means to share and unite. It is the simplest way for older adults and people with disabilities to connect and engage with their family and friends. There's no username, no password, no login, and no app to choose from. It's just a dedicated device. It's the Sociavi C2M Connect to Me device that's always on and ready to use. And families and caregivers just install the app on their smartphone. And then you can just begin sending photos, videos, and even have live-to-live video chats. And your loved ones, they don't have to do anything. They just love it. And because all of us must fight elder abuse and work together to bring awareness to this issue, Sociavi is supporting my efforts to produce my vital documentary, No Country for Old People. When you subscribe to Sociavi for your loved ones, they will donate the payments received, and you can help us reach our goal while connecting with your loved ones in the simplest way. Sociavi, connecting generations made simple globally. To learn more, please visit their website at www.sociavi.com. And when choosing the payments, select the annual subscription. The proceeds will go to help the production of our documentary, No Country for Old People, and I thank you so much.
When the world has got you down and
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alls, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priess.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter.
And I'm Don Priess, and this is Love Conquers Alls. Hello, Susan.
Hi, lovely Donald. How are you?
I'm lovely. That's what I am.
That's it.
Today I'm lovely.
And
That's
scene.
all. We says it all. What you up to? What's happening?
Well, we're both wearing black today. We got the
We are.
memo.
Well, I always wear black. This is kind of my
Oh.
uniform. It's kind of the same every show. Although last show I actually wore a button-down black shirt.
Wow.
Very
Isn't this
special.
interesting, folks? So interesting.
Yeah. Let's wardrobe talk.
I do like some therapy, which
Yeah, you do like your wardrobe.
I like
So-
retail therapy. I did clean out my wardrobe last week, though, and that is
too.
therapy too. Believe
my gosh.
you me, it's therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it feels so good cleaning out, and you find the most amazing things. You're like, oh my God, I forgot I bought that. This one still has a tag on it. It's crazy. So it's actually very.
I've already worn 3 shirts. Yeah, I've worn 3 shirts since I cleaned out my closet that I didn't know were there.
I know.
And I've worn. Yeah, it's
'Cause
like
you're a
buying. It's like
clothes
going
horse.
shopping.
Are you a clothes horse? You don't. But you only wear one shirt, so how's that?
Well, when I say the 3 shirts, they were all like this. They're
Oh, okay.
exactly- That's why I didn't know they were there.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like Theranos girl. What's her name?
Theranos.
Yeah.
Oh, she's going to jail this
Yeah.
week.
Elizabeth.
Prison.
Is that her name? Elizabeth?
Elizabeth Miller?
No.
Elizabeth
Miller.
Holmes.
Holmes, that's it.
Holmes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that show was fantastic.
Theranos. But she had a closet full of the same jacket and shirt and wore the same thing every day.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
With her voice
Yes,
like
indeed.
this. She put her voice down.
Theranos.
Theranos. That's my favorite imitation. Theranos. Anyway, we should get on this. I just saw on The View this morning, Michael J. Fox.
Yes.
And he's...
Because we just watched his documentary.
And we just watched his documentary and he has
Still,
Parkinson's called Still, and he is still moving along. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary how he's embraced this disease ultimately, and he's had it so long, and we have, and oddly enough, with the always, well, not oddly, it's the way life goes, the way the world works, that of course, out of the blue, I get a query about a woman who is was a caregiver and a care partner for someone with Parkinson's, which is quite similar to Alzheimer's in certain ways. And she has such a great perspective. So I'd like to just bring her on, Don. Can you introduce her?
Can I tell you about her?
Please.
Please?
Do it.
Please?
Do it now.
All right. Terri Pease, Ph.D., is an author, coach, and consultant for spousal caregivers. She's dedicated her life to working with people who are facing highly stressful situations. When Terri married her husband, who had Parkinson's disease, she brought her wealth of knowledge and experience to bear on caring for him. She trained staffs in organizations around the United States on how to offer supportive, empathetic, and trauma-informed care. Her professional experience has informed her approach to caregiving and to encouraging Parkinson's caregivers to make the idea of self-care real, practical, and possible. Terri recently authored Love, Dignity, and Parkinson's, From Care Partner to Caregiver, which offers a new approach to caregiving that can help ease the stress and anxiety that comes with this diagnosis. In addition to her work as an author and caregiver advocate, Terri continues to post information, support, and resources on her website. And with that, we are so honored and delighted to welcome Terri Pease. Hello, Terri.
Hi, Terri.
Hello.
So nice to
Hi,
have
Don.
you.
Hi, Susie.
It's very nice to have
I'm really
you.
delighted
Yeah.
to be here.
Thank you. It's a great conversation that we're going to have with you, because it's really about caregiving, and we've been focusing a lot, obviously, because it's Love Conquers Alls on Alzheimer's, but Parkinson's is also if you're going to bundle kinds of diseases there's a lot of similarities, even though it doesn't manifest physically the same way, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think that, by you learning and really immersing yourself in this world of caregiving, that you have a lot to offer anybody that is really caregiving and care partner, which I'd love for you to also define the difference, because it said earlier that when we were talking before we started recording about this new role that you're taking on as a care partner as opposed to a caregiver. So I think that's interesting. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how you come to this interview today. What's this, the journey of your experience?
Well, it's funny, I was talking about this with someone else earlier this week, and I come to this with a combination of experiences. I was trained as a developmental psychologist, and I was a college professor and worked for many years in a variety of sort of social service settings where I was supporting the people who took care of trauma survivors, essentially. And so I spent a lot of time just thinking about the ways in which things happen to people and the kinds of support and help that people need and what the helpers need. So I've always had that sort of double layered focus on the person who experiences the trauma or the difficulty and the person who's doing the helping. And that's always been sort of my attention. So I've done that. I've done that in a lot of different kinds of settings. And then late in life, I had a very happy second marriage, and I married someone who told me right away that he had Parkinson's. And so I met my husband knowing that he'd had Parkinson's for a good long time. And I have to confess, I tried really hard not to agree, because it was hard to say yes to someone who had a condition that I knew very little about, but I knew it was not a zero, it was not nothing. Right. But he was my guy, and he swept me off my feet, so to speak. And so we ended up marrying, and I became a caregiver, and I took care of my husband, whose Parkinson's first was moving around kind of slowly, and then, as I say, started to gallop along to the point where it was, the most pervasive thing that he was experiencing, and the most profound part of our relationship was my moving from wife to care partner and then to caregiver. And I took care of him for the rest of his life. And then after he died, I was at a kind of wellness retreat as I was asking myself, what's next for me? And the question came up in the course of the activities of this event. Can you have a happy and successful marriage with someone who has dementia or another degenerative disease? And I wanted to know the answer to that because I felt I'd had that kind of marriage. And so that led to my writing this book.
Oh, that's amazing. It's so in the zeitgeist right now with Michael J. Fox and going, and watching his wife Tracy Pollan, in, like he says in his documentary, in sickness and in health, and she's been there the whole time, and and it's been a long disease. Like my mother's Alzheimer's was 16 years of a disease, and I mean, Michael has had it since 1991. His has progressed very slowly, but now it's it's really at its peak from all signs. It looks like that. So it really is extraordinary, that you and are modeling that kind of relationship.
He has lived an extraordinary life before he was diagnosed, and he's lived an extraordinary life since the diagnosis. And a lot of people are thinking about Parkinson's disease. And one of the things that I noticed, I looked at an interview that he did just the other day. Michael J. Fox seems not to have the primary cognitive effects that are so common, and ultimately, as people age with Parkinson's, up to 80% of people who have Parkinson's will develop a form of dementia, Parkinson's dementia. And he doesn't seem to show that. He seems on the ball, sharp, cognitively, probably pretty much as he had ever been. For many people, it's different than that. And I think it's really important to talk about the ways that Parkinson's changes the kinds of cognitive functioning that a person has, and also, most importantly, I think the way Parkinson's affects the kinds of relationships that exist between a person with Parkinson's and their caregiver. I certainly didn't know about it when I met and married my husband.
And especially a caregiver that is a spouse. It's
Right.
It's so different. And I've seen that time and time again with, married couples that are experiencing Alzheimer's, where there's a lot of denial, where they don't want to lean into it because it's too hard, and different from you, they didn't marry into it; it just occurred. So in some respects, you were rolling up your sleeves. You knew kind of what you were getting into, but obviously you had no idea because you hadn't experienced it, but you knew something was coming. Right?
I knew something was coming, and I definitely said yes to the challenges that were going to come with this marriage. But then, as Michael J. Fox says, or his wife says, when we marry and we say in sickness and in health, that's really saying all of us at some point will experience sickness and aging. And so that's a commitment that any person makes who marries.
Did you discuss ahead of time the commitment as you going to become not only a care partner but then a caregiver? Was this discussed? And he probably didn't know. You never know where it's heading, but how the depths of it. Did you discuss that ahead of time? What were the expectations going in?
I don't think either of us really knew the way that Parkinson's would affect our marriage. I assumed that it was the physical disorder, the shaking, sticky feet, the difficulties with mobility and stiffness. And because I was familiar with people with disabilities and had had people with disabilities in my life before, I knew I could do this. This is not too hard for me. I did not expect the changes that led to, for example, that my husband could no longer feel concern for me or empathy for me, because Parkinson's, and I think this is a way in which it diverges from Alzheimer's, is that it specifically seems to focus with its reduction of dopamine. It reduces the capacity for empathy.
Wow.
And I will never forget, I had a fairly scary and serious diagnosis, which fortunately resolved and hasn't left me with any long-term effects. But when I got the diagnosis and when I was been treating for this disorder, he looked at me one day and he said, I know I should care, but I don't.
Wow.
And, that sounds awful. And yet he wasn't saying it in any ugly way at all. He was so puzzled by that he couldn't find it in himself.
That's so interesting. We have a mutual friend whose husband was in a car accident, and for a very long time, he's since regained a lot of his, cognitive deficiency that was the result of the accident. But wherever the head injury was, he was lacking empathy, and he knew it, just like what you're saying. And he was like very nonplussed about it. He was very, just rational, and said, I don't know if I can love you anymore. I just don't feel it. And it was very, and then I remember her saying it was a huge problem. And, the difference is she had hope that he would regain it, which he did. Whereas knew that it was only going to get exponentially worse. Is that correct?
It does. I think that's right. I mean, it changes over time. And as the Parkinson's progresses, sort of the whole configuration between spouses or committed partners changes as the person becomes less able to engage at all verbally and becomes more clearly dependent for everything, for all the ADLs and for all of the moment-by-moment care.
What
the relationship
ADL?
kind of would have changed.
If I can interrupt.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a bit of jargon. It's activities of daily living. All the stuff that we do, cleaning up, washing dishes, washing our hands, feeding ourselves, going to the bathroom, all of those things. And people lose the ability to manage those. So, yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing when that relationship shifts and that they're just not there. I'll never forget the day that I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and I just looked at myself in the mirror and I said, he has nothing for you. And it was heartbreaking to make that realization. But then it was also freeing, because once I understood, and as I came to understand that this is part of what Parkinson's has done to his brain and his capacity to love, once I understood that, it freed me from looking for it.
Right.
And that was a great relief, because then I wasn't feeling hurt every time he, didn't smile.
You embraced it. Can I ask you just a detail on Parkinson's, because I'm not that familiar with it, but in terms of that kind of, like with Alzheimer's, you get these, and there is a lack of empathy. It can manifest that way where, it's really their world, almost like children, right? And they don't see outside of that. But what we live for as caregivers of someone with Alzheimer's are those moments of lucidity, which do happen, right? So does that happen with Parkinson's?
It's different. I mean, first of all, people say, and I think it's really true, every Parkinson's case is different. But let's talk about my experience, and maybe we can generalize from that. But in my experience, the losses were spotty and inconsistent, so that even though there were some areas in which my husband could do very little for himself, I'll give you an example. We went out, we bought a sailboat, and we were about to give it away. And so he was talking to the young men who were fitting up this boat and this little sailboat, getting it ready. And he got involved in a very complex conversation about the wind and the sails and things that are beyond my understanding. And he was his regular sailor self. Right. But he couldn't really find his way back to the car. Right. And so there's that kind of inconsistency where he's there and then he's not. Or he's connected. And I'm talking as though all people with Parkinson's. Yeah, I think the similarities, the disorders are so individual that rather than trying to separate them and say, well, this is one and this is the other, the responsibility for the caregiver is pretty much the same, whatever the label is that the neurologist put on the difficulties the person is having. To be present, to be engageable, to be engaged, to step back and step in. That kind of nimbleness, that's required of anyone who's helping somebody who has a kind of dementia.
Right.
My mother, was just diagnosed with Parkinson's about 2 years ago. She's 89, and they say it's really not progressing much right now, thank God. But I noticed a little, and my brother and sister and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe Mom said that or acted that way or is acting like this. And I was like, guys, this is not, you we have to be, you know, ready for anything. We don't know. And because it does manifest differently for everybody. I mean, and again, I have no real knowledge of it, you know, and you going in with no real knowledge of it, even though you were, you know, caregiving was your expertise, it's so different. And I think it's just staying in tune with what's going on and not looking for, you know, saying, you know, not trying to find a reason. You know what the reason is for that change in behavior. It's not because they suddenly are, you know, this or that. It's not that their personalities change. It's due to that disease. And it's so difficult because it does manifest differently with everybody. You know, I look at Michael J. Fox, that's one thing. Your husband was another thing. My mom's another thing. And then there's a million different ways. So I guess it's just being able to just roll with the punches and know that it's not, you know, necessarily them. It's the disease. And I think that's helpful when having to caregive for somebody.
I think that's really true. Being able to, I used the word before, nimble, which means, in my mind, to be able to just let it come as it does and respond to it in the moment. And it's something that I've learned recently and that I've been working on and talking with other people about is that actors who learn improv learn to say yes and. Yeah, and there are people talking about that, you know, to say yes and. There's a good TED Talk about it. And that is as a response to what comes by as a person has dementia and presents you with, you're not my daughter. What did you do with my daughter?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I come with an acting background and an improv background. I did it for a very long time. And so that makes so much sense. That's a beautiful way to frame it. You know, I was trying to think of the terminology when you were talking about your husband, you know, getting into his sailor self, and that, you know, it's cognitive reserve. Like we have everybody has a cognitive reserve. Like my mom was a singer, so you know, she couldn't remember anything, but you start singing, you know, Our Love Is Here to Stay, and she's on it. You know, and so that's her cognitive reserve, whereas your husband had this as one of his cognitive reserves, right? So it's really, really imprinted. And so that does get very confusing because they appear to be themselves until they're not. And that's when it's heartbreaking.
In just little moments.
Yeah.
Especially because you think, there he is. Oh, I've missed you so much.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Where are you? And it's gone that quickly.
Yeah.
So how did you ride that? And how long, let me back up. How long did you have a marriage, really? You know,
we were married, I count on my fingers, 11 years. And I would say that Parkinson's was the third party in that marriage for the last 8 of those 11 years.
So you had about 3 really good years, was a symbiotic kind of relationship, and then it started chipping away.
That's right.
Wow, you're that's quite a hero, and that's quite a task you took on that most people I don't think could have. I mean, you're very special. It's very.
I don't feel like it's something special so much as that this was just working, and we found a way to still be together as he changed. And one of the things I had to learn as a caregiver is that the job of meeting him became more and more a one-sided job. At least in our fantasies, a good marriage is give and take and give and take. Mm-hmm. But for me, my experience was that, and that's what I said to myself in the mirror, there's no give. It's just receive. And this is just coming to me as I'm saying this. There's a difference between my holding back and his taking, and my being ready to offer so that he can receive.
Right.
And maybe that's a way of thinking of dementia caregiving, the more that we can offer what the person can receive.
Did you ever become resentful? And if so, how did you deal with those feelings? I mean, were you guilty for being resentful, or maybe you never were resentful for the lot you were in?
I don't think I felt resentful. I've said to other people that there was never a day when I was sorry to have married him. And there were days when it was hard. It was hard, enough to keep me, in tears. And yet I was never sorry. I never felt that it was a mistake to marry my husband. And I know that in plenty of situations, people do feel that they made a mistake by joining in on a marriage to someone who has dementia, such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. And I have certainly advised people who are thinking, I've fallen in love, I've met this person. He's got Parkinson's. What should I do? Should I marry him? I love him. And I think it's really important, and part of my sense of responsibility is to say, these are the facts as I know them.
Right.
These are the ways that you can inform yourself. And in fact, I even write about that in the last chapter, the second to last chapter of my book, where I talk about the fact that you are free to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that you can't really say a meaningful yes unless you feel free to say no, even to something as central as caregiving.
Also, I think what's different and sets you apart, maybe I'm wrong, is that, I can imagine somebody who's had a long history. You got married, you've been together for 20 years, 25 years, and then they, contract Parkinson's, and now you've got all this history to carry you, right? So you made history in 3 years, and that was your base. And that's why I do think it's extraordinary, because, you had to really live in the moment and really make that history and make it the value that you wanted out of it. Because, it really, I hear what you're saying, and that you don't think you're extraordinary. I think you are. And I'm a very empathetic person and very giving. Like, I really caregave for my mom for the whole time, but I still think as a couple, it's different. And I could walk away when my mom would lash out at me, as you saw in the movie. I could, it took a while to learn it, but I also had the history, and she's my mommy. Makes a difference.
History, I think that history makes a big, big difference. If people can look back on a satisfactory marriage, no marriage is perfect, but if people can look back on a marriage that has met their needs, and they feel that they've met their partner's needs, then there is a kind of almost like a relationship bank. And that bank helps to give them something to draw on. I encourage people, if they've learned of a diagnosis, right away, start taking pictures, making voice recordings so that you have those things. I have a couple of very, very precious recordings of my husband's voice speaking to me, and in one very special case, reading a poem to me. And there were days when that's what held me together, listening to that.
Oh,
and so
you had that foundation. You had that foundation that you knew that this wasn't just a flimsy house. there was a foundation there, and so when the wind blew, you knew that it would hold up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Again, so let me go back to what you said about caregiving and care partnering. How do you define that? Those two different.
Well, I think they're. That's in the title of my book, because as I thought about it, to be a care partner means that there's a project, an enterprise that you and the person who has the disease are working on together. Whether it's somebody who can still prepare their own meals or track their own medication, and you take on things that they cannot take on for themselves. And sometimes you do it just because you can and because you want to, and sometimes you do it because there really is no other choice. But when you and the other person are both engaged in managing or combating, if you can, a disorder, that's being a care partner. When the person who has Alzheimer's or Parkinson's loses the ability to participate in their own care, I think you become a caregiver. And that's a very important change in how you think about what you're doing and how you feel about what you're doing, because all of this, what I was saying before, all of the offering, the giving, the doing comes from one side.
Right.
You did write a book, Love, Dignity, and Parkinson's from Care Partner to Caregiver. Why the book? At what point did you decide I have to write about this? And was that more for yourself?
Therapeutic,
I don't think so, because I know who you are.
Or both.
And I think it was for others. Or
I
both.
think it's
What
both.
was the, yeah. Tell us about
I
that.
think I wrote it for myself. I wrote the book that I wished I'd had. And
I hear that a lot.
I just thought, somebody needed to have said this, and nobody had said it. And so I did it. And I guess I'd always wanted to write a book. And that was the book that came.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot from authors that say, I wrote the book I wish I had.
Yep.
And I often tell them when we interview them is that you wrote the book I wish I had when I was going through this. Because, now I'm discovering all these wonderful books and authors. But when I was going through it, I had, I was really blazing my own trails. I really didn't know what the hell I was doing, to be honest with you. It was, I was learning as I went.
Absolutely. And when you're in the middle of it, you don't have the time to go to the library. You don't have the time to sit and research. And so the information really, the more that someone can hand you something and say, this is a place to start. This is information that will help you to understand where you are, what's happening around you, and how you can manage it. And so hopefully I've saved other caregivers a lot of the effort and a lot of the anguish that are, for me, were part of being a Parkinson's.
You've turned yourself into a caregiver for, or care partner rather, with
Right.
other care partners, givers. So you've been able to put yourself in that position. And so what else do you do? I know you do a lot, but why don't you tell us what else you've been doing in this realm?
Well, in addition to having written the book and trying to, let people know about the book, I've recently started an online program, an email program, so that caregivers can get a step-by-step mental reset that I call Rest and Refresh. Because finding rest is one of the hardest things when you're a full-time caregiver. There's never the opportunity to let go of the responsibility, to let go of the needs. And so this 21-day program is one of the things that I've created. My, website is other things, but basically what I want to do is offer caregivers resources and information and ideas and support so that they don't feel so alone and they don't feel so, isolated and like they're reinventing the wheel.
When you say I need a break or I need to, there's guilt involved in that, because it's like, if I'm not spending every waking moment and every sleeping moment dealing with this, then I'm not a good caregiver, and that's not the truth. What are some of the tips you could that you can give a caregiver that will allow them to, break off for a moment and be okay?
Some mindfulness, yeah.
I think it is mindfulness, but I think that when you recognize that this is what's happening, it's not my job to fix this. And the myth of caregiving is that if I'm good enough, if I love hard enough, if I sacrifice enough, my partner will turn to me and say, I have what I need, thank you. And that life will again feel balanced. And what I like to tell people is that it becomes something different than that. It becomes recognizing that this inability to fix the situation is where you are. That's what you're looking at. And finding ways, and I give people ideas about ways to say, this is what is. And it's not my job to try to fix it. And freeing yourself of that responsibility, freeing yourself of that, it's really a myth that you can do it all, means that you're free to choose. This one, yes. This one, no. This one, not this time.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good.
Because Susie,
Yes.
I know you went and you also felt like you could fix it. You could say, I can talk my mom out of Alzheimer's. I can teach her out of Alzheimer's. and I'm sure with Parkinson's the same way. You can't talk them out of it. You can't teach them out of it. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah.
And it's really going moment to moment. and saying, okay, I'm doing my best.
And
That's
also,
all I can do.
Yeah, and what you were saying about, choosing what you can or will do and being able to say, I don't want to do that. I remember when my mom became incontinent and I was like, I don't think she would want me to address that. And I don't think I want to. I'd rather ask for help with that. And I didn't feel guilty about it because I just made that decision. I was there for her for so many things when I know what I was good at and I know what I could give to her to make her have a better life, or as better, as good a life as she could while she was alive. So, but I did make those choices, and I think you have to for your, and I think it's okay. Some people say, oh, I could never clean my mom's mouth. And I'm like, get me in there. I'll get right in there. But for some reason, they can't do it, but I can. And I didn't want to deal with the incontinent. And because I felt like my mom, and maybe it was my own, projection that she would feel embarrassed or less than.
Lose her dignity.
Lose her dignity.
Yeah.
I think each person is different. I mean, I had the experience myself that the incontinence, I was able to manage that. At some point I said to my husband, you're not doing anything that I don't do. We all have bodies and this is what bodies do. But there were other forms of personal care that I just found extraordinarily difficult. And giving myself permission to, I never learned to shave him. Thank goodness he had mostly a beard because I never learned to shave him well, poor guy. And being able to say no. I use the image that if your partner came to you and said, move that refrigerator, I don't like where it is, you wouldn't have any qualms about saying, no, I know you want me to, but I can't do that.
Right. That's a great metaphor.
I'm sure there's many times you feel like you're all alone, literally all alone in this battle. Is there anything you can do, like as far as employing the help of family or friends what kind of support would you want? Now, obviously that you don't want them to come in and change and shave him. No, but how can they support the caregiver? Oh, maybe.
I think, again, that's so individual. That is going to really vary from person to person and from family to family. I actually write about this idea of being a secondary caregiver and the unspoken guilt that secondary caregivers feel, and that there are ways that they can step in without feeling like they have to take on the primary responsibility for caregiving. And giving that caregiver opportunities for rest are the most important things, even more important than any individual service. Taking over the responsibility long enough for the caregiver to have an hour or an afternoon or a week that they're free of the caregiving responsibility.
Respite, yeah.
That's the biggest gift.
See, that's really good because a lot of time, and this happens a lot, it happened in my situation that, one person becomes the caregiver and everybody else just, goes along with their, they drift away. And, and I think it's because I'm guessing, I have no clue, but I think that if you could assure them that you're not asking them to take on the full board, right. That you're just saying whatever you can, if you can come in and, give me a set, give me a minute. It's like my daughter has 2 little babies now, and I'm happy to go in and give her some respite, but I certainly can't go in and take over, and nor would I want to, nor would she want me to.
Right.
And I think we need to frame it so we realize that, it does take a team of people, and whatever you can give as a secondary caregiver is well appreciated, whatever it is. Right? I mean,
think that's right. The secondary caregiver really helps to sort of share the burden and gives the caregiver the opportunity to offload some of the things.
Yeah.
Can I talk about one other resource that really saved me more times than I can say, which is that the online community of caregivers is so powerful.
Yes.
And makes such a difference. There's groups like Parkinson's Better Halves and My Parkinson's, and all of these give you the opportunity to go someplace and say, I can't do this anymore and I hate my life. And then there'll be 15 people who say, sweetie, I understand. Let's breathe together for a minute. And that sense of being accompanied in the role of caregiving, I think makes a very big difference when you're in the weeds and doing it day after day.
Oh, I so agree with you. You know, I mean, look at Al-Anon. That was so success. That's like a great program for people that are dealing with something that is not their problem, but how do we deal with it? How do we accept it? How do we accept that we can't change it, but we can support it in a way that is healthy for us and for them. And I think that's super important. Yeah, there has to be support, and you need an outlet. You need to be cathartic and have a place that you feel safe to do that. Because there's a lot of guilt in saying, I'm overwhelmed and I hate this day and I'm angry. And, you know, there were times when my mom was tiny and I was like, I'm going to pick her up and I'm going to put her in her bed and she's going to go for a timeout. That's it.
You just want to run away from home sometimes. Yes. And it's so wonderful to say that and to have 35 people online say, me too, you bet.
Yep, ditto.
And you suddenly feel better.
Yeah, you do. Because if you don't talk to other people, you don't know that you're normal. That's right. Normal. You know, it's why we made the movie, because look at I adore my mom and my mom adored me. And yet there she is calling me a whore. Yeah. Right? And how do you, and like, I mean, I wanted people to see that, you know, we can ride that wave and that it doesn't mean anything. It's not real. It's not real.
Boy, it's a hard lesson to learn, to be able to step back from it and sort of observe it.
It is.
And isn't there times where you want to talk about it, you want to share how you're feeling it, but aren't there times where you just don't want to think about it? You want to talk to a friend and talk about anything else but that. And I think for people who are friends of the caregiver, they don't know what to say, do we want to talk about this, or do you want to talk about anything else? What are there any suggestions for friends of the caregiver when just talking with somebody who's in that war?
Well, I think it's always reasonable to say, I'm sorry that you're facing something so tough. What's on your mind right now? What would you like to do right now? And then put it in the caregiver's hands to say, let's talk about playing bridge or buying a new outfit.
Yeah, Chico's. Let's go to Chico's. Right. Let's have a margarita. Retail therapy is always, I'm a big fan. Retail therapy, it works for me.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, and also you like meditation. Mm-hmm. I see that about you, and you actually offer a meditation that you can download on your website. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a free meditation because I thought that it's really designed to give caregivers a 10-minute break. And I suggest find a moment when your person is asleep or when your person is, in someone else's care, or that precious, precious time between finishing the grocery shopping and turning the ignition and going home, and sit in your car for about 10 or 15 minutes, listen to this meditation, and just be somewhere else. And it's surprising how much difference just the mental break can make in how you manage the day-to-day physicality of caregiving.
Right. I find it so difficult to meditate. For me, it's so hard, and I want to do it. And I know there's a way, but do you have any tips on that? Because there's like, Dawn is my best friend. We decidedly we were going to learn how to meditate. And we went to this studio that is all meditation. And we could not look at each other because we weren't going to break into laughter, because we were like, are you meditating? Not me either.
I'm just thinking about everything else. Just thinking.
Yes, please do tell.
There's a very interesting phenomenon called laughter yoga. And it was started in India. I actually was trained in laughter yoga many, many, many years ago. And I won't even try to show you how it's done, but essentially it's using the sounds and breath of laughter to disconnect from your life. And you can just look it up, laughter yoga, Google it.
Oh my
and
God,
you'll
Dawn,
find
that's
out
for us.
it's really fun and funny, and it will make a big difference.
I'm going to tell you
so
something.
funny.
I'm going to admit to you. Yeah, we also went to it. I dragged John into everything. He's my BFF. I am single ever after. He's been through everything with me, and I continue to drag. He's Ethel to my Lucy, and I said we're going to go take a yoga class. And I'm very high energy. I do hip hop dancing. I do step aerobics, but I need to get mindful, right? So we go into yoga class and we're in some downward dog position. And of course, I cannot look at him. And
our faces are squished up against the floor, and we're
we
looking
just
at each
start
other.
laughing, but we're holding it in. It's like when you're in just a bad time to have the giggles, the bad time. We got kicked out of class.
Yeah, we got booted right out of there.
The teacher came over and she goes, I don't think this class
is not for you.
This is not for you. Laughter yoga. Try it out. It's really a lot of fun.
Oh my God, that's
now
so
you've
funny.
Inspired me to do a video about laughter yoga for Parkinson.
Do it, Terri.
Please
do
do.
it. We'll be your guinea pigs because all we want to do is laugh.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I have a friend who knows a lot about it, and maybe we can have a little conversation about laughter yoga.
We should do that. We should do a live. We'll do a live or something and get everybody.
That would be fun.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be great.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. Listen, you guys, I am A-type. I'm high energy. It's so difficult for me to slow down and to but if it's, but laughter, like they say, is good medicine. It's great medicine. I mean, that changes your endorphins and it changes your everything. I highly recommend laughing.
Great. Well, I expect a report on laughter yoga.
Done and done.
Does that ever come into play when you're in the middle of this and everyone knows that you're in a very hard situation, and if you happen to get away, or I don't know, for one evening and you go to dinner and you're laughing and you're talking, was there a moment where you say, "Oh, I shouldn't be laughing. I shouldn't be enjoying myself. There's something serious going on here." And how do you get out of that if you do?
Well, I think many caregivers do have that feeling that I'm not entitled to any joy or any recreation or because my partner is suffering. And I think that's mistaken, because ultimately the Parkinson's, the Alzheimer's is their journey and it's not your journey. And even if flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone, you still are separate people. And you don't have the disorder. And you are free to be human in your own way. And that means joy. I think if I were feeling super guilty about that, I might make a point of thinking about something that gave my husband a sense of satisfaction and relaxation. My husband really liked to have his hands and arms massaged. It calmed him and soothed him. And so I might make it my business to do that and give him some measure of contentment and comfort that suited what he was capable of. I think sometimes caregivers bring their partners along for those events thinking, well, I'm going to go have fun, so I've got to bring him with me so he can have fun too. But it doesn't work. And then you both end up kind of frustrated and unhappy. And so
You're
it's
so right.
freeing to know this is mine.
Oh, Terri, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. You just triggered a memory of mine, dragging my mom to things that I thought that she would enjoy, and she didn't, because she wasn't capable of it. It was too overwhelming. It just wasn't appropriate. And it was a disappointment for all of us.
And on the other hand, I'm going to tell the story just because I learned a lot from it. When my husband's older daughter got married, he worked very, very hard to write a toast to her. It was absolutely spectacular what he was able to do. Practice. We went to the wedding together, and it was very clear to me that I was there to help him participate in his daughter's wedding. and I did it in a fancy dress. But I was really clear in my own mind that I was not there for a sip of champagne or a bit of wedding cake. And once I let go of that, I was able to be comfortable with being there as his person. But if I had gone there thinking, oh, it's my stepmother's wedding and I'm going to participate, it would have been so unhappy and so frustrating. And again, neither of us would have felt very, very engaged or very happy. And the way it ends up, it's a very, very warm memory that I hold very close, how well things went for us at that wedding.
Oh, that's awesome. That is a great lesson, because you don't set yourself up to lose. You set yourself up to win.
And I think going back to just a little bit back was that I think it's important, hopefully, that the person that you're caring for, your loved one, doesn't want you to be miserable. They don't want you to not enjoy life. That's the last thing they want. And I think it's sometimes we forget that they don't want you to, and
some
so
people, most people.
Some people, there are some that want you to be miserable. Yes.
But they were probably that way before Parkinson.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
If they were grumpy and awful before, they're going to continue to be grumpy and awful for them.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a
again in my
story.
movie. My mother says to me, she gets lucid and goes, "Oh my God, you got to put me in a home. You got to live your life." And that was a gift that she gave me that night, and I was like, oh, you're going, but not yet.
But not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. But, so I tried to bring humor into everything because I knew that was a language that my mom spoke. So humor is very helpful, like music, like things that are visceral. That can get in. You have to find things that open those doors that look locked.
Yeah, I think that's right. And finding your way. Sometimes I talk about finding a way to reach in past the dementia and find the person. And when you can have those moments, you feel connected again. And learning how to just walk, psychologically walk past the craziness of being called all sorts of awful names. And remember, how do you feel about your daughter as she's yelling and screaming at you? She's likely to say, oh, my daughter is the sweetest thing, but you're a horrible person. And that's weeding your way past the dementia craziness. That's an offensive word, craziness, but past the dementia and reaching in and tweaking the connection that person feels with you.
Right. And just to validate what you said about craziness, it's not, I mean, it is craziness in terms of like, it's not what you're used to. It's not what they're used to. It's the way that this disease manifests. So it's not a judgment on the person. It's a judgment on the disease, and the disease is the culprit, and the disease is the louse.
Yeah. I mean, it's a crazy situation.
It is. And no one's set up for it. No one goes, oh boy, I can't wait to be a caregiver. Like Lisa Gibbons says, there's no caregiver Barbie. There isn't.
Maybe there should be.
There should be, but nobody grows up going, I want to be caregiver Barbie, But
that's true.
But but we do. We grow up and we put our big girl pants on and our caregiver Barbie hat, and we go to work. Right?
Yes, we do.
As we do.
So what's next? Where are we heading? I mean, I know you've got the websites and continuing to give it any information. Is there another book in the future, or where are we going?
I'll tell you what my biggest wish is right now. I would love to have the opportunity to talk to doctors, to family doctors, and to neurologists, and to movement disorders doctors about how you can engage the caregiver in the treatment and care of your patient. I think that insurance and, just sort of the way the whole medical system is structured, there really isn't a lot of room. And yet I can say that with all the great doctors and all the great medical care that my husband had, there was only one medical person who looked me dead in the eye and said, you are doing a good job. Just once. And
yeah,
it should have been more. I should have been seen. The caregiver should be seen by the the caring medical professionals, and
You're
they
so
don't have a
right.
pathway into it. They don't know how to do it. And I would love to get in front of those folks and say, here are things you can do. They don't take too much time, but they'll make a difference for you, for the
And for
person
them.
who's doing the caring, and for your patient.
Beautiful. I love
Because
that.
they don't understand. They don't understand. I mean, you know, that sometimes it's like they know the physical manifestations of the disease, but they don't know that connection, which is probably the most important thing, which is the human side of it.
That's right.
Right. The collateral that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So anything we missed that you would like to talk about? Because this was lovely speaking with you.
I could talk about this stuff for days on end, but you guys are very thorough. And I think that we've made a lot of really important points that I hope will help caregivers to feel better about this whole process.
For sure. And I really think that your journey is so unique to what you know, that I've talked to other people, and we've interviewed a lot of people, but going into a marriage knowing, taking it on, fully aware of everything is, and I'm sure there are many others like you that have done that, but don't, and so, or maybe are on the, on the fence about it. Maybe they are. Your story can give them a peace of mind and give them a direction, whether it's one way or the other. So I think that in that way, you're very, very valuable that way. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Definitely.
Well, definitely look for Terri's book, Love, Dignity, and Parkinson's, From Care Partner to Caregiver. Visit her website, which is seabury.com, and also there's terripease.com. seaburyhouse.com. We'll put all those
It'll be in the show notes. You won't
notes.
miss it. You'll find everything.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those good things.
Yeah.
And we can't thank you enough for being here today. You've opened our eyes and our hearts, and we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience and your world.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really great, Dawn.
She was I mean,
she
amazing.
was
Not only
wonderful.
amazing for what she did, but just this, this essence to her. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
She has a very calming and like a
Classy.
gravitas, as I would
Yes.
say. What'd you say?
She's classy and
Classy.
and-
She goes. Listen, she shops at Chico's. That's
we
my
say
mother's
more?
favorite place. If you've seen our movie, My Mom and the Girl, Valerie Harper's wearing all Chico's in honor of my mother.
In fact, you can see right behind you. She's right in the middle there on the poster.
Oh yeah, she's wearing a
that's
Chico's jacket.
Chico's.
Yeah, Chico's. Anyway, no, she was terrific, and it's interesting how things get in the zeitgeist. With Michael J. Fox and here we're talking to someone with Parkinson's. It's not come up in my purview.
No,
to
and now
book somebody,
with my mom,
Yeah.
it's now part of my world. Although it's, thank God, knock all the woods in the world, it's staying very minor right now.
Yeah.
And
I wanted to ask her if there was like a difference between like it is with Alzheimer's, like an early onset Parkinson's as opposed to your mom being in her 80s and
well, I mean, Michael J. Fox got it when he was very young,
Very young.
very young, and
Yeah.
and we don't know how long my mom's had it,
but if it's not
but it's
manifesting,
got I can't imagine it's any more than 3 or 4 years. I mean, I can't imagine
because it's not manifesting,
and it's
so,
and right now they're saying it's just kind of remaining where it is, but
Yeah.
it's
But
it's amazing how similar some of the between Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of similarities as far as on the caregiving end.
There's definitely, and even with the documentary, when I talk about ableism, I mean, Parkinson's, dementia, same kind of bias, because it does affect the cognitive abilities. So once that's in question, the respect that is afforded is not to be found.
That's true.
So anyway, but in honor of us today, because I'm all
Oh,
about,
my.
what does it say,
a-
Dawn?
It says OV. Oh wait.
No, look.
I know
Look
it
at-
says love, and
It
I think
does.
it's in our title.
It's on my
It's
shirt.
in our minds, and it's in my heart, and it's on your shirt. And you know why? Do you know why?
I don't.
You
I
want,
do.
You want me
but
to say it?
why don't you tell me again?
Okay. I'll say it. And that is because love is powerful, love is contagious, and love conquers all. So we really appreciate everyone.
We really do.
Listening
Thank you
and
all
watching.
for listening.
We hope you like, we love, you subscribe, you share, and also please consider possibly making a small donation or huge donation to No Country for Old People. We need your support. We don't like to beg, but we're gonna beg. We
go
do
to the
need
National
your
Consumer
support.
Voice for quality long-term care, and have a wonderful day. Bye. Hey, this is Susie Singer Carter, and I just wanted to take a minute to talk to you about bed sores. I know, but if you're like I was, you probably don't have a clue what a bed sore really is. Most people don't. I mean, no one told me, and I really just assumed it was part of the body that was, like the name says, sore from laying in one position too long. And if you change the position, all better. Wrong. Bed sore is really a euphemism for more appropriate names, such as pressure wound and decubitus ulcer. Unfortunately, I discovered what a bed sore really was when my mom was admitted into the hospital last year with a stage 4 ulcer. That is the worst level. You don't ever want that to happen. Bed sores can develop quickly and worsen rapidly and can lead to serious health issues, even death, if they're not properly treated or properly treated, and that includes cleaning and dressing the wound, but most importantly, reducing pressure off the sore by frequently changing the position of the person off of their wound so it can heal. And that can mean propping the person up 30 degrees to the side, far enough to be off the lower back, but not too far as to be on the side hip where there isn't much cushion, right, between the skin and the bone. This is why I'm so excited to tell you about Bed Sore Rescue, which was designed by an amazing woman, Gwen Jewell, a nurse who was tired of fooling around with simple pillows and bulky wedges that just don't work. The Bed Sore Rescue positioning wedge cushions are uniquely designed to provide ergonomically correct and comfortable support for a sustained period of time without touching the sore. And the curvatures and bilateral angles make it possible for the bed sore cushion to be used to support many other body parts as well. You can float the heels, you can put it under the head, you can put it under the arms, behind the knees, both sides. You can even use it as a breakfast in bed table. The curvatures of the Bed Sore Rescue fit the curvatures of your person's body, and it's made to meet all the patient safeties and bed-bound positioning standards for acute and long-term care facilities. I wish I had it for my mom. I really do. So chances are, if you have a loved one in a long-term care facility or at your home, you may become a pressure injury soldier too. But bed sores should never get to stage 4. And one way to ensure that they don't is to make sure that as soon as one begins to develop, you keep the pressure off. You can do that easily with Bed Sore Rescue. And you can find Bed Sore Rescue and many other pressure solutions online at Jewell Nursing Solutions, home of the patented Bed Sore Rescue positioning wedge cushions, pads, and pillows. That's Jewell, Jewell, NursingSolutions.com. And when you use the special code NCFOP, the entire amount of your purchase will go to support our important documentary, No Country for Old People, which chronicles my mother's journey navigating the nursing home long-term care crisis that literally began with an unreported, untreated pressure wound. So take the pressure off yourself and your loved one with the Bed Sore Rescue.